question is, do you have it in you to make it epic?
Hello everyone, welcome back to Backlot Banter, your favorite movie review show on the internet. I'm Tanner Dexter, joined sometimes, by my co-host who is hell-bent on gaining revenge, Abram Buhner.
True.
That's right. We are here to talk about the newest film in the Mad Max saga, as it has been so recently dubbed, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. We both really enjoyed this one. We're big fans of the Mad Max series now. We watched all of them. I had never seen the first three films. So that'll be some context that we'll add to this review. But before we get into it, I want to remind you to subscribe to Backlot Banter, if you would be so kind. Like this video, comment down below your thoughts on the film, and if you would like to talk further with us about this film or any other films or video games or what have you, you can do so on our Discord server, link in the description. You get it. What did you think of Furiosa?
I thought Furiosa was phenomenal.
Yeah?
I totally loved it. I mean, I think I'm becoming more and more affirmed in my opinion that Mad Max Fury Road is my favorite action film of all time.
I mean, it's a good choice.
Yeah.
It's a solid choice.
And so, obviously, I came in with very high expectations, but I also had those tempered by, like, every review I read saying, this is not the same type of film.
Yeah, it's far different in terms of its pacing, in terms of the, the story of the film. It's far more, it's an origin story, as one would expect, but I had to get used to that a little bit. Like, I knew in my brain, I was like, I know this is different than Fury Road, but the first, 20, 30 minutes, I'm like, God, it just feels different, it feels slower, but you really settle into it, I think, and you get... It has its own pace, for sure. This is half an hour longer than Fury Road, and still moves at quite a clip, I would say.
Yeah.
And yeah, is much more about its story. Its story spans 15 years as opposed to like 36 hours or whatever. And it's great. I really, really enjoyed it too.
Yeah, and I'm also really glad we watched the original films before we saw this, because I think it's different from Fury Road not only in like the visceral experience of watching and the structure, but also just in the tone and the world building. It's a lot more like Road Warrior and Thunderdome.
Absolutely.
In terms of how funny it is, in terms of how bizarre a lot of it is. So I imagine this being quite a jarring experience to people who have only seen Fury Road. It certainly would have been to me if
the
we
majority of
hadn't gone
that is what that is what the marketing is trading on. All of the aesthetics are very similar, as we've seen with the previous films, the aesthetic can kind of change and transform across different films, and this is right out of the book of Fury Road, which is a good book to be writing your same thing out of. It feels very much in line with that. I mean, somewhat spoilers, I guess, not really. This film basically ends the day that Fury Road takes place.
Yeah.
Like, that's the very end of the film, is Furiosa, like, sneaking Immortan Joe's wives into the war rig. But Tucker, I keep wanting to call you Tucker, damn it.
You can.
That's fair. Abram, this film does not star Charlize Theron. It instead stars Anya Taylor-Joy
And another small child.
I'll pull up the child actor's name, but Anya Taylor-Joy, what did you think of her taking on this role of a younger Furiosa?
I just think she's really good. I mean, we heard before the film came out that this was that Furiosa did not have much dialogue. I think it says Fury Land's dialogue, and that is true. Furiosa doesn't talk much, but I think an maybe undersold element of the film is that it is very talkative. We introduce a lot of characters that have a very strong dialogue presence in the film.
Mostly Dementis, Chris Hemsworth's character.
We have him, and we have got Praetorian Jack.
Yep.
And we have Immortan Joe is there for a little while. There's lots of characters that take up a lot of screen time with their dialogue, but I feel like Anya Taylor-Joy punches at their same weight or higher, because I think she just gives a very stoic and captivating performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she was pretty open in some, some interviews and things like that. She's like, I'm not really sure how I felt about this. It was kind of like I was alone making this whole thing. Very similar to what Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron were saying when they were making Fury Road, in that this is so much George Miller's vision that he oftentimes with his actors has trouble conveying that vision, and it all comes together in post, is what it really seems like. Like, as an actor, you're used to like conveying information with dialogue and with your lines and things like that, and she has 30 lines of dialogue here, and a lot of it is her things that are happening on her face. And for example, she was the character of Furiosa is a child for a longer than I had previously thought. Alila Brown is child Furiosa, and that's what a good. I mean, before she turns into Anya Taylor-Joy, that's probably what, half of the movie, you know, not 2/3 of the movie, 1/3 of the movie maybe. It's a long time, and I mean, Elila Brown is great too.
I think she's really good.
It is incredibly sparse dialogue, but the world is as rich, or if not richer, than it is in Fury Road. I think that's what I really enjoyed about it. You know, George Miller is saying like, oh, you know, I don't have lore for Mad Max, all this yada yada yada. He does. It's just all in his head.
Yeah.
And it really comes through in Furiosa. You get a lot more background on like the three fortresses of the wasteland, you know, Gastown, the Citadel, and the Bullet Farm. You get much more time spent with the people who control these places. And Dementis, Chris Hemsworth's character, is like this biker outsider of like a fourth sort of group that is coming in to take over these regions. And so you get a lot stronger sense of the balance of power and the scale of the world and how those scales can be tipped, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's what the first half, when we have Elila Brown as Furiosa, does a really good job at, because I think the movie does a good job having a lot of things happen to Furiosa in a way that I think not only empathizes you to the character, but really galvanizes you and gets you ready for when Anya Taylor-Joy's portrayal of the character takes
over
revenge.
Yeah, takes over and takes revenge, especially like starts to take control of the narrative. You know, is like fed up basically with things happening to her, and tries to, as one might expect from the marketing materials and everything, she is stolen from her home in the Green Place as a young child, and is basically focused on getting back there until the end of, you know, halfway through Fury Road.
Yeah.
And so you get to see that opening sequence there, and the CGI work is great, the setting is great, the design of that all. It's like this valley with lush greenery and windmills and everything.
Yeah.
But obviously they have to be holed off from the rest of the world. So when Furiosa's mother goes out to chase her down after she's been stolen by these raiders, they're like, none of these guys can live. They cannot tell others where this place is.
Yeah.
And so there is this vague idea that they convey to other characters in the film that like this place of abundance exists, but it sort of falls by the wayside as Furiosa herself gets sidetracked and is like sold from Dementis to Immortan Joe as part of this like bartering deal to give Dementis Gastown, or not, Gastown. He takes control of Gastown initially. What did you think of Chris Hemsworth as Dementis?
I thought he was really good. I've been saying to a friend of mine who's been on the fence about seeing Furiosa. She loves Fury Road, but said, man, those trailers for Furiosa really gave me a bad impression of the film.
Okay, interesting.
And I said to her, I think that they're just bad trailers. Because I think that Chris Hemsworth as Dementis is a lot better in the film when he has time to really fill up a scene than when you're grabbing on a dialogue.
Yeah, when he's being like, do you have it in you to make it epic or whatever, and when he's got his curled up mustache and his beard, you're like, okay, I'm not really sure how this is gonna meld with the film, but in this film, you know, giving you a lot more time with the characters, George Miller also plays into the absurdity of this world as well, which has always been an aspect that Mad Max fans have loved, that this film is, that the world of it is so stupid and silly, and people are wearing dumb costumes and have dumb names. Yeah. And Chris Hemsworth falls in line with that very easily, I would say. He's just a character who is a lot more... his power is really... his power of like speech, I would say, and that really comes across in his character. He oftentimes is like grabbing his microphone and addressing his massive gang of bikers or whatever, and trying to negotiate and trying to cut deals and intimidate people. And so from that standpoint, Chris Hemsworth really impressed me here. Yeah, I think he does a great job in balancing that out and like obviously being a over-the-top crazy character in a different way than like in Immortan Joe would be, where he's a lot more like visually striking and intimidating.
Yeah, and I mean like it also I think just goes back to the fact that I think that you have to go into Furiosa expecting the old Mad Max tone in general, because I think when you're thinking about Dementis in the context of Fury Road, it doesn't make sense. But this is a film that's actually quite funny. Yeah, it's actually very funny, and I think that his sort of offbeat demeanor is just the demeanor of the entire film for the most part.
Yeah, honestly.
We do obviously have some pretty harrowing sequences, but we often do come back to this more humorous spirit, I think. And Dementis is actually really good in both.
Yeah, he is really good in both. So to talk a bit more about the story, so yeah, like I kind of mentioned that a lot of this film, more than I anticipated, is about child Furiosa being sort of along for the ride as Dementis comes to learn about the Citadel and then cuts deals with Immortan Joe to take over Gastown. And then Furiosa, she is basically sold off to Immortan Joe in a sequence that is, I think, hard to parse what is happening. Did you feel the same in this deal breaking between Dementis and Immortan Joe? And it's like, give me Gastown. I have a bomb at Gastown. It's going to blow up. I have this code, but I also have a hostage here with a spike that's going to go through his head that is also attached to my nipples.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's actually sort of a larger issue with the film.
Okay.
In that I feel like it's not particularly concerned about its internal logic a lot of the time.
Gotcha.
Because there's all. Are we doing spoilers?
It's spoilers for Furiosa. We both really like the movie. Obviously, go see it in theaters.
Yeah, definitely see it in theaters.
Yeah.
You know, after Furiosa escapes from not Scrotus, from Rictus.
Yes.
There's a time jump, and we return, and she's pretending to be. Is she pretending to be a war boy? She's pretending to be a worker in the Citadel.
A war boy. I don't know if all the workers are war boys, but effectively she's like she's hiding the fact that she is a runaway or was supposed to be one of Immortan Joe's brides or whatever.
Yeah, and then we literally have Rictus like poking her, and they're they're getting in each other's face, and like it's never really addressed how she sort of found her way into this, or how Rictus doesn't recognize her. But I think that ultimately, a similarity to Fury Road, despite the structural differences, is those things don't really matter.
Yeah.
I think that this film is more so concerned with constructing exciting sequences.
And it does have those in spades.
Like even this negotiation sequence, even if there's a sort of a degree of logic that might be missing, it's just really fucking funny and compelling to cut into that scene, and we hear immediately from Immortan Joe, okay, we're gonna kill him. And then we've got Dementis and the gang coming in with the bomb, and we got this thing rigged to his nipples.
Yeah, that's right. He's got a giant like spring-loaded spike at the back of the head of the old ruler of Gastown. He's like, if you kill me, I have it rigged to blow up Gastown, and I'm the only one who knows the combination to de-arm the bombs or whatever. And so George Miller has a very distinct style of filmmaking, obviously, and so he kind of makes that negotiation like an action sequence.
Yeah.
And as we've talked about in terms of dialogue, he's not as concerned with that. So I think this is one of the few moments where those don't exactly line up. Or like like for me, I was like trying to keep. I was like, okay, so he knows the combination, and so if they try to kill Dementis, then the bombs will go off, and they have a spike to the back of this guy's head, and if the spike goes through him, that also triggers the bomb. I don't know. It doesn't really make sense, but that sort of direction, like directing that scene as an action sequence, makes it still exciting, makes it very interesting, even if it's like a little harder to keep up with. That is not the case for the action sequences here, which are, just as good as in Fury Road. They feel, more interspersed because they are. It's not like one long extended action sequence. We get, 3 or 4 of them throughout the course of the film, and they are long, they are audacious, they are very interesting to watch. They still have that sense of, maintaining space and maintaining all the positions of all the cars and all the war boys. And that's what makes Fury Road great, and that's what makes these action sequences in Furiosa hold up to that level, I feel.
Yeah, I think they're just as good, but I also think they're good in a different way too, because when you watch Fury Road, I think that Junkie XL soundtrack does a lot to just shoot those action sequences to the moon. That's not really the case for the action here. Like you think of the main battle on the Fury Road to secure the war rig.
Right.
There's not the same frantic feeling there. It actually is. It's this continual building of tension in a different way as the stakes continue to ratchet up and new enemy types
That's right.
enter the battle, essentially.
Very much.
We're not relying as much, I don't feel, on the same tools that we relied on Fury
Yeah,
Road.
dude, that's a good point. I mean, I think the skill of the direction is still there,
Yes.
which I guess was maybe my larger point. But yeah, they do feel different. It's not a sense of like, I can't believe we're stretching this maintained high octane, high strung feeling out over a long period of time. It's an increasing ratcheting, and then we pay off with, it always pays off in a great way, whether it be, our chase on the Fury Road, or Furiosa chasing down Dementis, or when when Dementis is chasing down Furiosa, or all those kinds of things. It always pays off in a great grand way.
Yeah, and I think, George Miller had more room to play here with different styles and different techniques, because Fury Road's one contiguous run. That's the whole point of the movie.
Yeah.
This is not that. So I think it results in action sequences that have an opportunity to feel a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I really love the one in Bullet Town. I think the Bullet Town one
that's a good one. Yeah.
is the best. Because that it's so dynamic, and we introduce this element of non-vehicular combat, which I think is really cool too. As we have the Furiosa sniping, and we've got something happening over here,
and Dementis has his rocket launcher that he's trying to shoot off and everything, and then there's the crane and a giant tower that's falling. And it's the fact that George Miller is able to keep all these things in check while he's shooting, but also in post-production, while he's editing, while there's CGI renders being done and everything. They maintain that sense of scale. They maintain the sense of space. Like you get a sense of where everyone is and what is happening at the same time, what is happening before and after. There's a great sense of Fury Road is like a masterclass in editing from that standpoint.
Yeah.
And Furiosa is much the same. And I think that's something that can alienate the actors in the scene as well, as I've heard, but that's kind of besides the point, I think, because it just works. Like, that's the beauty of what George Miller does in Fury Road and Furiosa, is that ultimately, when you're sitting down in the theater, it just all melds together and works perfectly.
Yeah, and I think that's... I want to also speak to the experimentation in the filmmaking itself also, because there's one scene that I really like, which is this time lapse of Furiosa's wig growing over a tree branch.
There's a couple of those, yeah. I mean, when they're constructing the first war rig, we also do a time lapse.
Yeah, it's very cool filmmaking, and I think that's actually something that puts Fury Road in such high esteem in my mind. The amount of energy, not only in the editing, but the amount of meticulous care in just ridiculously small insert shots in Fury Road is just absolutely extraordinary. But it doesn't really call attention to itself that much, because you're still caught up in the general frantic motion of the scene. I feel like in Furiosa, George Miller takes more time to slow down in some ways and have these experimental sequences here that you're not really thinking you're going to go see when you sit down to watch a big summer blockbuster like this. So I really appreciate that this is in some ways like a more formally challenging movie. Even looking at it on the higher structural level, the 5 different parts we have are various degrees of contiguous with each other. Sometimes there's big time jumps, sometimes there's really not.
Yeah.
It's a very it seems like he's given himself this degree of freedom to try things that I don't think there was in Fury Road. Not to say Fury Road wasn't a massive technical achievement, but he cut everything down to the bone. There's no fat on Fury Road at all.
Right.
I think the space he has in Furiosa results in a very interesting movie.
I mean, I think that's a great point, because as we had kind of mentioned, this film it feels longer. It is longer, but for good reason, and like I said, still has a definite sense of pace to it that I'm not like, boy, this is dragging on. You never feel the drag of Furiosa, even though it's a film that takes its time more than Fury Road, which most movies do, frankly. I also just quickly want to note, I think this doesn't feel like a sort of tacked on sort of sequel or prequel, I guess, technically, because it still feels like it's the other half of what George Miller is trying to say with Fury Road, and thematically. Fury Road is very much like, we have to basically beat the inhumanity out of the apocalypse. Max is very much that. He has to learn to be open himself up to people. The emotional payoff of Mad Max Fury Road is Max saying, my name's Max. My name's Max. And like basically allowing himself to care about and willingly like give up his blood for Furiosa. This one is, I think, George Miller exploring a lot more of those themes of like, how did they get here? Just like the nature of human beings in groups with resources being fucking awful to each other and wanting to have more and more and more and take over things and not wanting to give up anything. Yeah. I mean that's the case with like our three fortresses of the wasteland, and Dementus trying to like hoard that as much as he can and take that over hostilely. Do a hostile takeover of all of that, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I had a little bit, like, leaving the theater yesterday, I was kind of like, well, what's really the underlying point of Furiosa? Mm-hmm. I don't really feel like I get much out of Fury Road on a thematic level, but I also don't really want to, and that's not the film's intent, really. Right. But because Furiosa is so much more concerned with the world and everything, I was looking for a little bit more out of it. And I don't know if I necessarily found it, but I think you raise a good point in that ultimately there's no real reason for Dementus and Immortan Joe to be fighting.
Yeah.
It's actually just to the sort of the detriment of both. But I think you're right that in this sort of resource hunger, there's a point being made by George Miller. But I still don't necessarily think I leave this particularly enriched.
No, yeah. I mean,
thematically.
I totally understand. I mean, and a lot of that also serves to just be like cool shit, TM, trademark. Like, there's a character called the History Man, who is this old man who remembers the world before, and Dementus like continually asks to like define words for him or tell him things like that of the old world. And at one point he has this whole soliloquy about war as we get a montage of like this, as they call it in the film, the 40-day wasteland war breaking out between Dementus and Immortan Joe. And it's fucking cool. It's dope as hell, but I also think feeds into that thing of like, if Fury Road is us trying to refine humanity from the wasteland, Furiosa is, well, how does the wasteland crush that humanity in the first place?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Because we also do have, at a certain point, Furiosa is always interested to get back home. Mm-hmm. But she does certainly lose that after Praetorian Jack is pretty brutally killed.
Yes. And
she could have she had opportunities to just try to get back to the green place, but instead is very hell-bent on killing Dementus. Absolutely. It's always there, she reaches for the sawed-off shotgun earlier in the film to kill Dementus. She tries to kill him on the Bullet Town. But I think you do make a good point that ultimately we also see something in Furiosa get crushed too.
Yeah.
Which does put us on that path towards redemption in Fury Road.
The final scene, this conversation between Dementus and Furiosa as they have their like final conversation standoff before vengeance is wrought, really I think is quite poignant in that way, in that it's Dementus basically saying to her like, hey, the same thing that happened to me happened to you now. Like the killing, it's kind of a trite sort of thing, but it's done well. Where it's like, killing me is not gonna restore what was stolen from you by the wasteland by any means. But in a way, it sets up that perfectly of like a Furiosa being like, spoilers, I guess. She found her vengeance in a certain way, and then seeks to improve the lives of others, get back to the green place, help these wives of Immortan Joe sneak out again, instead of just, continuing that cycle of violence, essentially.
Yeah, you're totally right about that.
Yeah.
And I also do like, one of the last things I have to say about the film, really, yeah. I really do like the more, there's a feeling of myth around this film.
Absolutely.
We even end in a point of ambiguity as to how Dementus actually died.
Yeah, that's right.
And this sort of, not like the canon reason, but the reason we hang on is this notion of a tree growing out of his stomach. Mm-hmm. I really like that. I think that's something I really enjoy about Road Warrior, and something I don't really find. Frankly, that's kind of checked out of Thunderdome at a certain point.
The myth of that inherent to Thunderdome is like the thing with the captain. He's the captain and the kids of the wasteland.
I think that's a fun dimension of these movies that we don't really get in Fury Road.
Yeah, Fury Road is not really concerned with like having someone go on narrate about the state of the world or how
Yeah.
things came to be or why people are doing the things they do. But Furiosa is that,
Yeah.
and so I think there is there is a lot to be found there. Like, it really, what I was saying is like, it feels like the whole vision of what George Miller had in his head when he thought of Fury Road.
Yeah.
Fury Road was like, you know, the high octane, perfect action movie, there and back, boom, done. Furiosa is filling in, coloring in around the edges of that.
True.
And it's, if you look at those coloring around the edges, it's still a beautiful tapestry unto itself. 9.2 out of 10 for Furiosa.
I gave it a 5 stars. I'll just go 10, I guess.
Okay.
I honestly don't really have any issues with the film. I think it's
Yeah.
outstanding.
Getcha.
I think it's really outstanding. I think it is as strong a creative statement and as engaging a big blockbuster as Fury Road.
Yeah.
I just like Fury Road more.
I mean, hey, Fury Road it's a perfect movie. Fury
Yeah.
Road is a perfect movie. I don't know, for whatever reason, I can't say that about Furiosa, but it's still really, really fucking good. I really enjoyed it. I'll be watching it again this weekend, so I implore you to do the same. Watch it once or twice or 3 times. I don't really care what you do. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Because when it said Scrotus, the other one must be Rectus.
Oh, I get it. Okay.
But then it wasn't.
No. It's, yeah.
Who's Rectus? Erectus.
Rictus.
Yeah, but no, you were saying someone named Erectus.
Was I?
When you're saying Rictus is like Erectus?
Sorry. Sorry. I had to get this straight. His full name is Rictus Erectus.